this lecture, we are going to visit some basic elements in QML. This includes things like rectangle, image, and text. But before we start, I'd like to visit one element, which is the parent of all the visual elements that we have used so far, and many others. And that element is called item. Let's go to the documentation and look at it. We type in item here, hit enter, and you choose item QML type. Choose the latest version of Qt you have installed here. And if you look at the description, it says the item type is the base type for all visual items in Qt Quick. And if you look at the properties that it has, we have been using some of these properties. You can see that it has properties of anchors. We have been using anchors sent in parent. There are many anchors, as we are going to see. And these properties comes from the parent item, and other elements like rectangle and text happen to inherit this. So what we're going to do is create a Qt Quick project and play with these things for you to see them in action. Hit File, New Project. We call the project QML Basic Elements Demo. Store it in a location on our drive. Hit Next and choose your kit, which is desktop for now. We're going to hit Next and Finish. We are going to change the title here and create an item element. I think this is the first time we use this. We give it an ID. This property also comes from the item. We give it an X location of 50, a Y location of 50. And by the way, you can specify your properties on one line like this by separating them with a semicolon. The other thing you can do is this. This is also another syntax that is acceptable in QML. And I find myself mixing these things up. Okay, inside we're going to put a rectangle. You already know the rectangle. The width is going to be 50. The height is going to be 50. The color is going to be red. And inside we're going to put in a mouse area that is going to fill the entire rectangle. So it's going to say anchors. And we want to know when this mouse area is clicked. The other thing we want to do is to give this rectangle a fixed position. We are going to put it at X10 and Y10. And we are going to define other rectangles as well, just like this one. But we are going to change the X position and the color. So this one is going to be at X of 60. It's going to be green. Another one that is going to be at 120. And it's going to be blue. And another one that is going to be at 180, and it's going to be magenta. What do you think we'll see when we run this application? We're going to have this item wrap around these rectangles, and the coordinates of laying out these rectangles are going to start at this location because this is the wrapper container around these rectangles. Let's run the application so that you see yourself. So what is happening? The red and green rectangles are touching each other. Okay, let's put this back to 0 so that they don't touch each other. Okay, this is much better. To make things much more visible, I am going to assign a child rectangle to this item and make it fill the entire item. So I'm going to do something like this. And I'm going to give it a color of beige. Okay, why am I doing this? It is because the item element doesn't support this color property, and I wanted to put in a rectangle which has a background color so that things are visible. I'm also going to give this a border, and we are going to give our item here a width and a height. So the width is going to be something like 400, why not? And the height is going to be 300. Let's run. And you see that our item is wrapping around this beige rectangle. And you can see that the elements inside the item are laid out in the coordinate system of the item. You can see that X is 0 for the red rectangle and Y is 10, starting counting from the origin of the item rectangle. I hope this makes sense. And the others also keep increasing in X. The green rectangle is at a slightly higher value of X, and the same things happen for the blue rectangle and the magenta rectangle here. Okay, one thing you should notice is that there are some properties that come from the item element, and some of these are ID, X, Y, width, and height. If we go back to the documentation, we're going to see those. You see X, Y, Z. We have the width here, and if we go up, we can find the height here. So these are the properties that are coming from the item. But there are properties that the item doesn't have, and some of those include color and border here. Because an item is not supposed to be visible, it can't have a color like a rectangle does. One thing I want you to see is that you can use the item element to wrap around other items. We have actually done that by setting the X and Y position for the item element. You can see that they start here. So if I comment out these things, you're going to see that this beige rectangle, which is our item really, is going to move back to 0, 0 from the parent, which is this window element. Let's run again. Okay, you see that it starts at 0. We are able to manipulate all these elements just by manipulating the X and Y position of the item element. And I hope this drives home the point that you can use the item element to group different elements together and carry out group manipulations to the contained items. Let's uncomment this back and give it a next value of 150. Why not? Run again. And you see that it moves slightly to the right. Another element I want you to look at is the text element. So let's use it down here. We give it an ID, and we can give it a text property, which is the text that is going to be shown. So we can type in here, this is my text. And if we run this, what shall we see? Let's run. You see that we see this is my text to the top of the rectangle that wraps around our item element. And the text is shown at position 0, 0, which means that when you don't specify the X and Y position for your element, it is going to be at 0, 0. Okay, you should know this. Because we want our text to show down below the rectangles, we are going to give it a next value of, let's say, 100. And a Y value of 100. Another thing we can specify for this text element is the size of the font, and we do that by using the grouped font property and calling point size. We can specify 20 here. Let's see what we get. This is my text. These are the different basic properties you can use on the text element. And as usual, if you need to know more about it, you can select it, hit F1, and you're going to have its documentation open. The text items can display both plain text and rich text. For example, red text with a specific font and size can be defined like this. Hello World, font family, Helvetica, point size this, and color red. Let's actually copy this. Why not? Come back to our text and put in these properties. Okay, Control A, Control I to align these things. Run again. And we have our text here. And the font property deserves a little bit more attention because I don't think we talked about it yet. The font property is a grouped property, and that refers to the fact that you can call font.family, font.pointSize. So to look at this property, let's go back to the documentation and type font. Click on the latest version of Qt we have installed, and you can see a font value with the properties of QFont. Okay, it's like a QFont data type from the C++ side of Qt. It is a grouped property, which means that it has many properties grouped together. You can specify the family of the font. You can specify whether or not it's bold, italic, underline, point size, and many others. You can use the font like this, and this is really what we have been doing. They just specify more properties than we did. We can copy this thing and take it out. And we can specify these properties on one line like this if we want to. It's going to work. Okay, it's bold now. Another way you can specify the font is by grouping things together like this. So you can say font, family, just like this, and keep specifying the other properties on different lines, and whether or not it is bold. If we run the application, we are going to see the same thing. Okay, the same thing. And these are different syntaxes that are available to you to specify grouped properties. Another thing you can do if you want to is to specify these things on one line. We're going to do that. You can actually copy this, put this on one line, and separate things using semicolons like this. And this is going to work as well. Okay, this is the text element and how you can specify some of its properties.